Hi. So I think this is, I think, our first event that we're doing in person since 2019.
This is awesome.
DSS. We got used to doing them sort of virtually, but this is an amazing opportunity, having Jason come back for the game tomorrow. And he agreed to come and spend time with us here today. We have a bunch of people on Zoom as well, I think over 200 as we speak. So it's wonderful to have you here and those people there. Only for you in the audience, at the end we'll be doing a raffle for students to win 2 tickets to the game tomorrow night.
To watch us win.
Okay? So we're going to do that at the end of the night. Okay, I think you all know me by now. This has obviously been a great week for the school with the Doug Diamond's Nobel Prize on Monday, the 10th for Booth, so great way to start the year. And this is just a real thrill to have Jason come back. Jason, of course, currently president of the Washington Commanders football team. I have to keep saying a new name. It just, it's hard to. So the DSS, this is a big tradition for us. We've been doing this forever. And the goal is to bring in leaders from industry, from the community, from the government to share their insights and experience. And again, we went virtual at the start of COVID, did a bunch of events speaking to alumni like Tom Ricketts from the Cubs and Kurt Del Bene from Microsoft, asking them how are their companies reacting to COVID. And through COVID, that was pretty successful. So we did a bunch of events, some targeted to Europe, some targeted to Asia. But this is just such a thrill to come back and actually do this event in person and with Jason. So I'm just going to do like a little intro for you and then start with the questions. I have some questions that were sent in advance, plus you can send questions through the Slido that will show up on my iPad. I'll try to sort of mix and match them and curate them as I go ahead. Okay. All right, I'll make it short. Okay. You all know Jason, right? You've heard of him. So Jason is president of the Washington football team and basically is like the GM. He runs all the business divisions, ops, finance, sales, marketing. He's the first black team president in the history of the NFL, and I think still is the youngest president in the league.
Thanks.
So he was before that a partner in McKinsey's Washington, D.C. office, and I'll let him talk about what work he was doing there. He also led McKinsey's global inclusion and anti-racism strategy. So he co-founded their Black Economic Institute, which is a research group that analyzes things like the racial wealth gap, and has been doing a lot in public discussions about racial equity. He's also on the board of trustees at Union Theological Seminary, and we can chat about that as well. So Jason spent 7 years in the NFL as a running back, was team captain and NFLPA rep for the Cardinals during the lockout in 2011. He has a BA in psychology from Northwestern University, where he was an academic All-American student athlete, 2-time All Big Ten football selection, president of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Then received his MBA in operations and finance with honors from Chicago Booth. And this year was honored with the school's Distinguished Young Alumni Award. So please welcome Jason formally.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like those are always an exercise in seeing if a brown man can blush. Which is what that was.
By the way, if you can find the speech that he gave for the Distinguished Alumni Award, you should take a look at it. He gave one of the best speeches I've ever heard. So let me start with what prompted you to do an MBA following your NFL career?
I wish it were systematic. You're going to think less of me when I share, but for me, during my NFL career, I did a lot of what I'd call do-gooder work in my off seasons. So I did anti-human trafficking advocacy. My wife at the time led an after-school program where our older 2 daughters came into our family from. I led a house church. I started a charter school. I did a bunch of do-gooder stuff. And what I realized is there were a bunch of bleeding heart do-gooder people in this space who were really shitty with money. And their approach when the programs ran out or they weren't having the impact they wanted or they didn't have the scale that they wanted to change society, they went back to rich people and asked for more money. And I thought, okay, I need to figure out how this money thing works if I want to have the kind of impact on society that I want to have. So on a whim, I took the GMAT. Good thing I'm good at standardized tests. And I applied to business school. And for me, it validated my theory, even more so than just learning how to be good with money so I could be a good steward of it if I ran an NGO or something like that. But for me, I discovered here through Booth that really it was the capitalist engine, whether you like it or not, that sustainably can create social impact over time. And that if you can embed social impact into a business, or you can have a business that makes a lot of money at scale, then you can sustainably fund the good work that we want to see and the change we want to see in society. So that's what caused me to do it. But I had no idea what the hell I was getting into. Like when you all made me take accounting and things like that, I was just like, what is going on in my life? It was fantastic for me.
So then after your MBA, you began working for McKinsey, which at Booth, it's kind of that's what we do sort of thing. But so going in, did you think that's what you would do after Booth?
I didn't know what consulting was. I had no clue until I got here on campus. And Jessica, I was probably like a lost sheep when I was first here. I had no clue. Like everything from the course matter I was taking to the recruiting process, and this school just really wrapped its arms around me and allowed it to feel like a seamless process, or look like a seamless process, even though I felt uncomfortable every step of the way. And I didn't know about consulting, but I did know that my intellectual curiosity was piqued here. Like my inner nerd came back alive. It had been dormant for the last few years of playing in the league. And I looked at consulting as a way to figure out what I actually wanted to be when I grew up, and what actually drove me in professional passion, because this place kind of blew my mind. What I came in thinking I wanted to do, I very quickly realized I want to do something different. And consulting was going to allow me to discover that. And McKinsey was my only offer that summer. Y'all did your absolute best. Shout out to the consulting club. You did a wonderful job of trying to get me ready. But I got the same feedback from every firm. They said, we think you're really smart. Like your problem-solving capabilities came through on the case. Like shout out to Booth and the preparation. You have great leadership stories. You know, your tales of perseverance in the NFL. I got fired, I think, a dozen times in my first year and a half. Those stories really make a difference. It's the best leadership stories we've heard outside of the military veterans. But you're really raw and you don't speak the business language. Now there's some coded stuff in there too. I mean, I hadn't gotten my first Brooks Brothers suit yet. I was wearing my three-piece Steve Harvey suit, black with red pinstripes and gator shoes. You remember I was walking around here in gator shoes? Yes. Someone finally pulled me to the side and was like, well, it might do a little better if you change your wardrobe. So there was some coded stuff that wasn't fair in that, but it was also legit. But McKinsey, you call it the hubris of McKinsey or its value proposition. They believed they could take raw talent and turn it into something great, while other firms were like, we want you to be a bit more polished on day one. And so I landed with McKinsey, and it was absolutely the right place for me. They fulfilled that promise of developing the raw potential in me.
And how did you get from there to the NFL? Were you doing projects with them?
Yeah.
Was this like a dream for you to get back into the...
Not. It was not. I wasn't looking for it. I'm a lucky dude. I promise you that. Like, whether it was landing here or getting to McKinsey or getting to the role I'm in now, I'm a product of grace. So I led a practice that is probably the most unsexy practice at McKinsey at the time. We called it corporate business functions, but it's basically the back office operations, HR, finance, IT, procurement, legal, all of that stuff. That's actually the closest you get to being an operator as a consultant. And you can imagine as the pandemic was approaching, my practice was booming. I led that for the Americas and a little bit of Asia, and it's business turnaround stuff. We need to find $300 million in EBITDA in the next 6 months, like that kind of work. But I did that across different topics. And what I found is my secret sauce was being willing to take on the really hard problems. I'm a little bit fearless, maybe reckless, but taking on some of the clients in more challenging situations. But where the challenges they were facing were multidimensional, not just in the P&L, but across culture and structure. And so I started to do wholesale transformations, from everything from helping universities survive the pandemic from a financial standpoint by redoing their structure, looking at personnel and curriculum, all the way to the government and antiquated industries like rail and modern industries like tech. I did everything in between. And so I only had one sports client in my whole time at the firm. And it was actually a really fun one. But confidentiality, can't talk about it. But I actually got introduced to the owners of the team through a client of mine who said, look, they're going to have to take on a real business and cultural transformation. And I know this is what you do, so why don't you talk to them about what McKinsey can do? So I was pitching them. I was in a pitch meeting, and at the end of it, they called and asked me to interview for the job instead of continue the McKinsey conversation. And 3 weeks later, I started. That's how it happened.
Did you know going in about the challenges that the organization was having, and what sort of surprised you?
I knew it was going to be challenging. In fact, most people told me not to take the job. Most of my mentors, there are very few people that told me to take the job. I took it because I thought that there was just such a unique opportunity for change. So I knew that there was a culture transformation that needed to happen. I knew that there were allegations of past poor behavior in the organization, harassment issues in the organization, but that didn't really scare me because I had done a lot of that work at McKinsey, helping people to do that. So I was ready for that. I was excited to lead a rebrand of an iconic NFL franchise, from a name that was steeped in racialized imagery to one that was not. And that turned out to be not as exciting and as fun as I thought, but very meaningful. Very meaningful and a point of pride for me. The other is I knew that they were getting ready to find a new home, and the opportunity to lead an economic development project that would change the economic outcomes for the region for the next 30 years, and with the opportunity to deploy several $1 billion of capital and to become an operator and a person in the driver's seat instead of the passenger seat in deploying capital equitably in the economy was something that I couldn't pass up. But there were some things I didn't know, that's for sure. And I think the success that we've been able to have comes back to the first part of it, that getting the people transformation right in the organization, whether that's the difficult task of turning over, it's now about 80% of the organization in the 2 years since I've been there. So to some, it's a beautifully and inspiring transformation story. To others, I'm the Grim Reaper, right? But it needed to happen. To the business progress that's resulted from those new folks being in place, jumping from one of the least diverse organizations in the NFL to the most diverse leadership team in the NFL, 40% women, 50% people of color, significant given the narrative about the organization, and all of that turning into great business success. Doubling the season ticket member base, number 3 in new suite sales in the NFL, despite the crazy headlines about the organization, up 30% year over year in sponsorship, is a really good story that I'm very proud of. But my God, the route there was circuitous at best, and there were moments where I didn't know if the vision would come together. But through people and supporting and empowering those people, we've been able to do something remarkable, and we're just getting started.
So we had one question about how challenging was it for the organization to change the name?
Yes. Oh, this blew my mind. Because everybody had their own opinion about the old name. And the broad public narrative is like, this is obviously a racist name, right? That was the broad public narrative. You talk to our fan base, doesn't matter if they were white, black, male, female, rich, poor, they loved that old name. I think in our research we found that about 80% of our fans loved that name and did not want it to change. And it was a thing that was putting their fandom at risk more than anything else. So I went from thinking in my naive consultant brain, this is going to be so fun, we're going to do some market research, we're going to look at designs, to being like, oh my God, this is an existential thing, and the best possible outcome is to get a C-. I went from thinking this is going to be a triumphant endeavor to resetting the expectations of the organization. Our goal was to get to neutral sentiment in our fan base in 12 months after launch, and to not take a step back in merch, to not take a step back in sales. I mean, that is the most unaspirational goal that you could ever set, is to be bang on average at best. And so it also allowed us to take, we chose to take a different approach than others took. You know, the Cleveland Guardians changed their name, and they did, which is a viable strategy. They said, look, we're not going to engage the fans on this because we know this is not going to go well no matter what. So we're going to rip the Band-Aid off. We're going to just go in a back room, come up with a name, and we're going to announce it on Twitter at 2 p.m. on a Friday and hope for the best. And that is a viable strategy. And in some ways, man, choosing that might have been a little easier. But we believe that, number one, this was just too important to folks when we did our first round of interviews and engaging with our fan base to do it like that. And second, I thought we could learn a lot in the process because I knew a lot of my team was going to be new. So it was a chance to actually learn about this franchise and learn about our fans. And then three, I realized that this was actually more of a spiritual, psychological process than it was anything else. And we needed to give people a chance to grieve, whether I agreed with the old name or not. And I have my strong perspective coming outside of the market, like, yeah, like, this would be like a team called the Washington Coloreds. Like, that's not okay. But I had to have the empathy to understand the perspective of our fan base, even if my starting point was not only I didn't understand it or I didn't agree with it, but I was also kind of opposed to it. But I had to have empathy. I think that's something we can learn from as a society right now. Even when you meet someone with what you might consider an objectionable view, how can you have empathy and make connection? And it was important for us to do that over this process and give them the chance to grieve and to get past the old name. And when there were things that were in the public dialogue about potential names and we knew we weren't going to go that direction for some reason, we announced it and we spoke on it and we let people yell at us and we let them be upset because by the time we finally got to announcement date, people had started to make peace with it. And it absolutely paid off from a business standpoint. We got to neutral sentiment in 3 weeks instead of 12 months. We set a record for merchandise sales on Fanatics. We sold $1 million of merch in 12 hours on Fanatics. And then we broke our own record when we opened our team store on game day. And we actually ended up getting more than 1,000 times the monetary value that the Guardians got from their approach. Now, you can take 100 off of that because the NFL is bigger than MLB or whatever it is, but that's still a 10x return on this more prolonged strategy. And it's something that I think we fell into. I can't say that we knew from the beginning that it was going to work, but the bet paid off, and if we win some games, it will pay off even more. But the brand has really started to embed in our fan base, and people are starting to create their own fan traditions, and we're trying to do our best to make sure that people understand this is still the team of before, that this is still the team that's been around since 1932, which is the part that we as an organization must do.
So speak a little bit about how you run the team, what are things you manage, and how sort of analytical are you in the approaches that you take to doing those things?
Yes. The NFL has made a lot of money really easily for a long time, but the entire industry is at a crossroads and a shift. And because of some of the unique challenges of our organization over the past few years, and I would argue that it was a caricature of some of the worst practices in the sports industry, we are in a rebuild of our fan base. And as a result, we are having to lean into the new way that people want to engage sports, the new demographics of the NFL fan. And that requires us to take a structured approach and an analytic approach to rebuilding that. Most of these organizations we're pretty small. You have a huge brand, global brand, Chicago Bears, Washington Commanders, global brands. They're decent revenue. You guys will go to companies that have divisions that make as much revenue as us. We keep that stuff confidential, but it's not as much as you would think. Tiny itty-bitty organizations. I think our full-time staff are 250 people. All right. And so when you have that structure, you have a structure that ends up running like a small family business with all of its warts, nepotism, hiring, no standard practices, all of this stuff. But the impact is big because that global brand, when something goes haywire, it goes everywhere. It goes absolutely everywhere. And so for me, structure and analysis and understanding was critical when I came in because I didn't really have data. When I tried to assess the state of the business, we had to do our own baselining. And because I had been trained here to take a messy set of conflicting data sets and learn how to make sense of them, that combination of analytic rigor and pragmatism allowed me to baseline where we were. And one of the toughest conversations I had with ownership early on, I didn't know if I was going to make it out of this one, was to tell them the true state of the business. that despite what had been a storied franchise for a really long time, that the business had been in severe decline for a long period. And they had no visibility into that because my predecessor did Jedi mind tricks and found ways to lie about ticket sales and different things, where that was a very tough conversation. But it was not only the analytic approaches, the structured thinking, but also the important thing that you teach here, the way of communicating analytics and numbers in a way that's not unnecessarily wonky, that is accessible, that provides decision quality information, not just a bunch of information, was essential. And it built great trust between me and Dan and Tanya, where over the last 2 years, they now truly see me as the steward of the business. And it started there at the very beginning, a very difficult conversation about baselining this business. And the training here was essential to that.
That's great. So we had a question came in earlier. How do you view emerging sports and media players like Overtime, which have younger, more diverse fan bases and are creating their own sports league IP? Are they a threat to your fan base, for example?
No, I think there's the opportunity is to build in partnership with them. So the Overtime, the Buzzers, like all of these folks that are allowing people to engage in sports in a curated way, to pick and choose what they want to see, how much of a game they want to see, where they want to get their commentary from. There's an opportunity for us to give those folks access to our platform, our information, our data, and our fans, and the power of our brand to create affinity and loyalty. I think what they have all mastered really well is understanding what the consumer wants, what the sports fan wants, and being able to package it in unique ways where you're getting all of what you want and not a whole lot of extra stuff that you don't want. What they don't have yet is the ability to build deep affinity and connection. And that's what I have found is so powerful about this job and why I love it every day is this team means so freaking much to people. Like people cry, I cry also, but people cry when you lose. They are like, it's the one place still in this nation at least, and probably around the world, wherever football fans are, where people who hate each other in political dialogue, who are yelling at each other in chat rooms and on social media, when Terry McLaurin scores a game-winning touchdown, jump up and down and hug one another wearing burgundy and gold. It's a place that still unites people out of this deep, emotional, almost subconscious place from that part of our brains. And that is a powerful thing. That's why so much money goes into this sport. That's why this becomes part of rituals. And that's the thing that these very dynamic and creative platforms that have figured out what the sports fan wants in an agnostic fashion don't yet have. But that's what we can provide in partnership with them. There's a group called Wave Sports, which is similar, a competitor to Overtime. We're trying to figure out the right partnership with them. And I'm not afraid to try to push the league's rules on this stuff, because that's the hindrance. Is you've got these big TV contracts that are negotiated at the league level that flow down into the teams. But I do think the league sees that we do need to evolve overall. And we have intentionally hired a diverse team, not just demographically, but experientially. And we have the right people in our building to be first movers on some of this. And sometimes I got to break the rules a little bit and get hand slapped, but that's okay, is what I'm discovering, is that's an okay thing to do. And so I think some of these media partnerships with the Overtimes, the Buzzers, the Wave Sports, you'll see us start to do those in the coming years. The same way that legalized sports betting was once taboo.
I was going to ask that. We chatted about
allowed.
that. So 20 years ago, the notion of a team in Las Vegas wouldn't have been possible.
Right.
Do you feel this is an issue, a problem? Is it an opportunity? Where do you see this?
Opportunity. I mean, there are more people that engage the game through the lens of fantasy sports and legalized sports betting than engage it in the traditional ways. And to the point of embracing the change instead of fighting the change, we've leaned into that. You know, I don't think we've announced it yet, but we will lead the league in legalized sports betting partnerships in both number and value. Well, I mean, not value. Cowboys always get more money, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we'll catch them one day. But we see that as the way to create the next generation of fans, is to give them platforms that they're able to participate in the way they want, in bespoke choosing, in community with one another. That's the other thing about some of these legalized sports betting platforms and fantasy platforms. You're able to engage with one another in a way that makes the experience better. And if our brand is the one there, partnering with FanDuel and Fanatics and Bet365 and BetMGM, all our partners, then we're the ones that are able to lead them into avid fandom. Because I think the future, and maybe all of you are already there, you don't necessarily have a favorite team. You might have a favorite player, but you got a team that you default to if you got to pick a team. I'm happy to be that. I'm happy to be that because you're going to spend a lot of money still. You're going to spend a lot of money still. You're spending a lot of time with us. And we'll get the disproportionate share of your team-focused spend, and that's okay. And that's okay. So it's a boon to the league, and I love it because it highlights our players. And as a former player, that's really important for me because I do think that the NFL can be a thankless profession as a player. It leaves wear and tear on your body. There aren't a lot of great transition points into careers that are as lucrative. It's not necessarily always building a skill set that can make as much money in the marketplace. And legalized sports betting is creating more opportunities near term for those players, and it's highlighting them as personas, just like fantasy football highlights them as personas, which creates more monetization opportunities and wealth generating opportunities for athletes down the road. So I welcome it, and I think the next generation of media partners will do the same thing.
So we have a couple of questions that sort of touch on that. One is, what do you think of the change with college now, with athletes earning stipends and endorsement deal, the whole NIL, good, bad?
I have mixed feelings on this. And part of this is my Chicago training. I'm a bit of a dispassionate economist now because of y'all. And anytime that there is an inefficient market, a black market is created, right? That's the theory. And in college football, for a long time, there's a black market. It was the $200 handshake walking in the tunnel after a good game. It was the brown paper bag of thousands of dollars sent to your family to recruit you as a high school student. It was the, what's it called? Western Union wire from an anonymous donor after you played a great game. Now, be clear, to make sure Northwestern's name is clear, I never received any of that because Northwestern boosters don't care at all. They'll be like, what'd you get in your chemistry class? You know, like, they don't give a damn about how well you played. I wish. I think the only thing I ever got was a Chipotle burrito, you know, like one time, and I still like left a tip because I was nervous. But in some of these schools, like there is substantial money flowing to athletes through these roundabout, under-the-radar channels. So the fact that there's now a formal mechanism for athletes to receive the compensation that the market is dictating they deserve, I can't help but applaud that, especially for many of these young men and women that otherwise won't get that opportunity later, especially for women athletes. And that's what I've been surprised by, is how much women athletes have benefited from this. I thought it was going to go to sort of football players, basketball players at the big schools, male football players and basketball players at the big schools, and that was it. But some of the biggest NIL beneficiaries are women's field hockey participants or players who just happen to have a pre-existing strong social media following. And so the fact that women are monetizing at the same scale as some of the male athletes also makes me more favorable towards it. And the fact that all these folks might not have the opportunity afterward to monetize is good. However, I think it structurally changes the entire nature of college sports. And there's three arguments to be had, and I don't know the right answer to them. The first is that there is a benefit to campus, and there's a benefit to the structure of the academic experience that is predicated on these still being amateur experiences, where student athletes are part of the student body, even if they got a special dining table or whatever it is, that they go to class together, that they engage with one another, that they have this unique college experience which builds this sense of bond and affinity across the university. That's the more philosophic piece. The second one is that I think it starts to break down the structure of conferences. And you're starting to see this happen already. There's a massive, in college football at least, there's a massive consolidation of conferences happening. And that is probably not going to stop at this point. And I don't know what that means for the regions and areas that are on the short end of that. The third is I do think that at some point you have to wonder, while it's better than the black market, is this mechanism actually getting full value to these athletes? Because they're even younger than the guys who are coming into the league. And there are structures that the NFLPA put in place around rookie pay and all that some would say are stifling to the free market value of some of these rookies coming out, but actually are beneficial because the 22-year-old might not be able to actually advocate for their full value. And it'd be easy for us on the team side to say, I'm not going to pay this, you're not going to pay this, because we can do that in the structure that we have. So I do grow concerned that if this becomes the only mechanism for athletes to monetize, and this is it, then it's actually still falling short and we're losing some of the economic value. But I guess it's a TBD. It's really a TBD. I find it fascinating. I couldn't tell.
It's a huge change.
Yeah.
So just related to that, what's your opinion on sort of financial literacy awareness of professional athletes? Sort of what resources do you give them and what would you change?
So this is one where it seems like those resources don't exist, but they are actually available in abundance. The NFLPA has a great program that it does in concert with the NFL. And when I was coming through, it was optional, but now it's required for rookies. Veterans have to repeat it. It's everything from investing, financial exploitation. There's a certification program for financial advisors and agents that they have to go through that's fairly rigorous. Here's the issue, and why we still see so many professional football players end up in real dire financial straits on the other side of their careers. I think that the mindset that allows you to be a successful NFL player is counter to being a great investor or steward of long-term wealth. When you walk on the field, you have to believe that you are the absolute best at what you do and that the probabilities don't apply to you. And they haven't to date in your life. It's 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of high school seniors ever play in the NFL. So by nature of you even being in that locker room, you have always been the exception to the rule. And you have to believe that when you get out there because everybody is so damn good. If you get out on the field and you're like, do I belong here? Am I better than that guy? You're going to get your lunch eaten, right? You are going to end up in the dirt and embarrassed because you have to have this invincibility mentality to survive and be competitive on the field. It's a persona you take on. The problem is it's very hard to turn that off when you step off the field. Whether it's in your personal life, in relationships, the rules don't apply. And even myself, I consider myself one of the smart guys. I went to Northwestern. First chance I had to invest in real estate, I invested in this real estate venture in Missouri. I should tell you everything right there. And I was like, I know other people lost money in things that sounded like this, but I'm different. I'm smart, and fill in the blank of whatever my logic was. But it's that same mentality of the rules don't apply to me. I lost a shit ton of money, it's a technical term, in that first venture. But for me, I got scared out of it, and I buttoned up, and I listened because I had this educational background from Northwestern. I got fired 12 times in my first year and a half. It was like 9 times, I exaggerate. 9 times in my first year and a half. And that made me realize that this money wasn't going to be forever. So I listened. And so I think the few guys that do listen and embrace it are probably the folks that didn't need it in the first place. I probably would have been okay in the first place. And those that don't listen and embrace it, it's because it's counter, that vulnerability that it takes to get in that learning position is counter to success in the league. And I'm actively trying to solve that by creating an environment and a methodology of delivering that to players that allows them to absorb it and gets more adoption. And that's actually Matt, our chief of staff right there, is helping me to craft that. So it's important for me. And yeah, that's my honest take on that one. It's a little bit of a hot take.
Okay, a couple of questions just about skill sets and other things. So what do you feel is the most important skill attribute to have when you're pursuing leadership roles outside of your current discipline or organization? In the sense that you left something completely different to do this.
Yes, yeah. This is going to be a little bit of a cynical answer, but I think it's very real. I think it's the ability to tell your story. The stuff you do in these annoying crop circles at mixers and all of this stuff about who am I and what do I want to accomplish and all that, it is the best skill that you can develop. We do not live in a meritocracy. We don't. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter how hard you work. Those are minimum requirements for most folks. And if you add to it, you're a woman, person of color, openly LGBTQ plus person, add another layer to that. Those are minimum requirements for entry in any high-performing, highly compensated position or highly impactful position. Minimum requirements. They don't actually get you the job. The job is opened up because somebody decides, I like that person, and I want to pull them in. I believe in them, and I'm betting on them. And that is a difficult thing to hear, because we all want to believe that somehow fairness comes through. It doesn't. Your skills that you develop here, and you will have to be at a bigger advantage here than other schools. This is a real business school. This isn't a raise your hand. This isn't a raise your hand and answer questions really loudly HBS type business school. Okay, like that was for you, sir. This is a real one, right? And so you'll have that advantage. But the only way you get to use that advantage is if you get in the door. And the thing that I had developed as an NFL player who was getting fired all the time was I got the ability to tell my story and tell it boldly and lean into my strengths. What maybe even felt a little braggadocious to me was exactly the right tone to set with people who were looking to give me an opportunity. You have to be willing to say what you're good at, why somebody should bring you in, and you need to say it with confidence over and over and over again without feeling like you're fake or a robot or tired of it. And if you can do that consistently, with a measure of authenticity in it, that's going to give you more chances than not. So if you can develop that, to tell your story, to advocate for yourself, to create allies and sponsors, that is the best skill you can have. That has nothing to do with anything that you can particularly show on paper, but it's exactly where I am today, or why I am where I am today.
And let me flip it around. Another question said, over the past couple of years, you've been working to build out your team. What do you look for when you're trying to hire somebody?
Yes, it's different now than it was at the beginning. At the beginning, I always wanted really smart people. Because I just feel like you need to be at some, and you don't need the same type of intelligence, but you need intellectual peers to be able to move at the same pace, and that's actually important when doing a turnaround. And I still hold for that. You gotta be smart. You can't just be a charismatic salesperson who's like, aw shucks and folksy. No, we can't do that. Because when we gotta sit down and talk strategy, I need you to keep up. And that's what I appreciate about Dan and Tanya, the owners. They're smart. They're really smart. And so we can all be on the same page intellectually and move things forward. That's one. What's changed over time is I look for people that are really scrappy and really grounded. At the beginning, I got folks from some larger corporate backgrounds with a ton of experience. And a lot of those folks didn't pan out. One, because we're a small organization and everybody needs to be a player coach. You got to put your hands on the damn keys and do work yourself, including me. Like, I came from a pitch meeting before this that I'm selling. I'm out there selling like everybody else, including me. But it's also a mindset that doesn't think anything is beneath you. Because it's been hard. A turnaround is hard work. And you got to do crappy things, and you got to have crappy things said about you sometimes, even when they're not fair or right or true. And I need people that have the grit, the resilience, the ability to do that while being motivated by whatever it is. It could be money, it could be mission. I don't actually care about the motivation. As long as that mission and that motivation is enough to drive you, and then you're willing to take it on with everybody else, I really solve for that. So I ask about challenging moments that you had in your career, how you were resourceful and pulled things together when you were working on a shoestring budget. I want to hear about scrap and grind and mess, because that really resonates with us. And then I ask about motivations. And it can be anything. I just want to know it's true and it's sustainable. That's what I look for.
So you've done a lot with the school. You continue to be involved with Booth. You hosted events for us in Washington and in Chicago. The question was, what inspires you to stay involved with the school? Why do you maintain the relationship?
I feel like my mind transformed here. I had been an NFL player for 7 years. My first few years in that, while I was struggling to make it, it was challenging and it was growing me. But for the final 4 of that, it was kind of boring. It kind of plateaued out, and I had lost aspects of myself in that process. And when I came here, whether it was learning organizational psychology or learning how to code in statistics, is still I still love the fact that I could code in R, right? Like all of these like the puzzle solving that happens when you're frustrated as hell at night trying to make that model work. But like the puzzle solving mindset there, it unlocked so much in me in discovering things about myself, not just what I was capable of intellectually, but what I had in me, what fears came up in me as I was approaching the recruiting process, what insecurities arose. The environment here just allowed me to transform as a person, starting with my mind and down into my heart and my emotions, that I'm always willing to do something for the school because I completely shifted in who I am here. There's also the moments that extend well beyond the curriculum and the classroom and the recruiting process and all the stuff that I'm referencing, was the really powerful conversations I had with people, whether it was Professor Noto or Matthew Jinskow at the time, or Professor Gertner, and like people who invested in me and thought about me as a whole human, and helped me have some of the more powerful conversations I've had in my life that were tough ones around life decisions and path and maturity and growing and impact on the world that I don't think you get anywhere else with the same type of people that are here. This is the right balance of folks. Serious, academic, smart as shit, but also full of heart. And I don't think you get all of those things together. We could probably be maybe a little more fun, and y'all can set us up to do that more going into the future, right? But I think we have everything else nailed, and it's something I take pride in, and I'm happy to give back to.
So we spoke about a lot of the work that you've done at McKinsey on racial equity. So first question is, as a Black alumnus, what message do you have for the school when you see that the most recent class only had 4% Black representation?
Yeah. I don't know what our numbers were before, but it's not surprising. If you believe that God has distributed talent to all people of all types, irrespective of race or gender or whatever, when you don't see similar representative outcomes, then it means something's wrong structurally. Something is wrong structurally. I lucked into coming here. I just wanted to be in Chicago, so I applied to all the schools here. I didn't have the relational knowledge, the institutional knowledge about how to navigate all of this. And so I think the biggest issue is that depending on where you're born, depending on what you look like, this is a more known path than it is for other folks. So I would say like the best and brightest of Black talent that would thrive here at Booth and contribute substantially to the student body don't know the tried and true path. If they're going that path, don't have the same resources to prepare them for that path, whether that's the money to take the Princeton Review class or whatever it is. And so I think that Booth, and I know Booth is seriously committed to this because I worked on it while I was here, is to go from doing what everyone else is doing, and I think we're doing the best practices across the board of recruiting diverse pools, incentivizing diverse talent, providing scholarships where needed, where it's a need-based issue and stuff like that, to actually starting to work backwards into the systemic pipeline issues that exist. I'll give an example of what we're doing, and there's probably a corollary for the school, but there's a systemic challenge with Black head coaches in the NFL. And it's even more obvious because 70% of the guys on the field are Black. So it's like hard to say there's a dearth of Black talent that knows football, right? It's not the case, right? And so in this case, what we found was that it wasn't about not having the right amount of talent or even having the right number of black coaches, but there weren't a lot of black coaches moving through the quarterback room or the offensive coordinator position, which is where head coaches come from. So when we had the opportunity to create a fellowship, the NFL asked everybody to create a minority fellowship. We specifically chose the quarterback room. We named it the Doug Williams Fellowship, Coaching Fellowship, and we are intentionally placing a coach from a historically black college and university in that role. They'll be there for 2 years. We pay for it. They get the apprenticeship, the development, importantly, the network and connections. That's where I get back to like this relational capital and intellectual capital. They get knowledge of how to play the game. And we launch them to a career in an offensive position group. Then we backfill that again with someone else from an HBCU, and we fill the role at the HBCU from which we took that coach, so they're not put out either. And it's our small way of starting to develop a pipeline. But the good thing is, and I think this is elite business schools too, because it's not like we're huge in number. These little things can make a big difference very quickly. And it's the law of small numbers. Yeah. It's the law of small numbers. Yeah, it's 4% today, but in this student body, if you do some of those systemic things, 2.5 years, 3 years from now, you can be in a completely different place. Actually, when I was, just after I retired, I think the NFL had 8 black head coaches. That's 25%. That was probably a peak, and people wouldn't be writing the articles they're writing now. Mm-hmm. It can very quickly get back there and further if we all did stuff like we're doing across the NFL at scale. So I think that's probably the next step for Booth. And I think the other thing is just staying committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, and you'll get more than your fair share, right? 4% is under fair share. If the population is 13%, that should at least be a goal, right? But I think you can even get more than your fair share of black or brown or women or LGBTQ plus talent, differently able talent, whatever it is, by just staying committed. Because the backlash is coming to DEI. I mean, let's be frank. Like what I hear in boardrooms, what I hear in private conversations with other CEOs, is that like, okay, George Floyd died a while ago. We're tired of this, and we're ready to move on. That's the real talk that's happening in some of these rooms. And I think by simply staying committed as an organization, talent will still want to come here. Because the emerging talent doesn't feel that way, even though the infrastructure feels that way. So as the backlash happens, as workplaces become less inclusive and inviting, the places that stand by that are going to stand out to people. And if Booth can stay committed, then you'll see some momentum as well.
Great answer. So related to that question about none of the owners of the NFL's teams are black, 32 teams. What does the NFL do to promote black ownership, or is external pressure needed?
Well, this is one where I know that Roger and the NFL are committed to that. But the NFL franchise, our franchise is worth $5.6 billion. I can count the number of black people who can buy that franchise on one hand. So this is actually an issue with systemic inequity and the racial wealth gap, the source of my sort of professional passion. It's like, okay, so you got Oprah, Robert Smith, maybe Michael Jordan and some of those athletes, maybe, I don't know, there's like a handful of people that can buy these teams. And the NFL rules are fairly strict. You have to have the money to be a full majority owner in one single individual. It can't be institutional investment or any of that stuff. So it is where it is until either the rules change around ownership within the NFL, we evolve and become more like the NBA where institutional investment can be in place and actually people of color could make their wealth in the accrued value of the team over time. That is one path, and you could say that's an equitable path given so many of the athletes are black. There's a strategy there over time. The other is to do the hard work of building real wealth in all communities in society so that someone at some point can actually afford to buy one of these teams. It's one where the NFL will continue to take flack on it, but it's kind of like, is it really their fault that there's only 3 black billionaires running around here? I don't know.
All right, a couple of questions about your business, and then we'll switch topics. So Given that you're running so many things, what segment of your business requires the most attention, and what are you planning to sort of do about it?
Matt, I'm not gonna like put our business out there, okay? He looked at me like, don't you say anything. The best and highest use of my time is in 3 places. First is with our people. So that is engaging with our top team in one-on-ones, understanding how healthy the culture is in different departments, being a thought partner to the leaders that I've delegated to run the business on a day-to-day basis to help them solve their more intractable problems. It's really people management, and where needed, diving deep into challenging people issues. You know, I didn't realize, I mean, so much bubbles up to me as a chief executive. I just had no idea. I had no idea as someone who was his first time in that role, how everything that is, you know, really, really big in the organization has to eventually come to you in some way, shape, or form. So that's the highest and best use of my time in one part. The second one is it is really important for me right now to be out there brokering our next generation of partnerships. So I get out there, I'm selling my ass off like everybody else. But it's because I believe in what we're providing, and I do believe the platform of the Commanders is so accretive to these businesses, and we've staffed in a way with a first-of-its-kind content studio. We have an agency-quality, property-produced content studio within the team, so they don't have to use an external agency to produce agency-quality stuff with us. Like, being able to bring that to sponsors is like a really cool thing, but that's part of the vision that I'm articulating. And then for me, it's on our big strategic endeavors and our growth to the future. The new venue, which is an economic development project first and foremost, but is going to be a 100+ acre development that is anchored by a venue, but is not just football games. It's 90+ live events a year. It is retail and mixed-use development, regional corporate headquarters, hotels, residential, concert venues, green space. Like that effort is where I'm required as well. So those are the areas where I spend my time. I think bubbling up all of that is the financial health of the business, right? Like, those are my biggest responsibilities. Everything else, other folks can handle and manage. And we have some parts of the organization that, in my vision of getting us to be a world-class media and entertainment company well beyond a football team, some of our business divisions are further along that path. Others are closer to immaturity, where I've got new leaders who are really developing and putting their folks in place. And so where needed, I dive deeper there. But that's about how I spend my time. And that means it's a lot outside of the building. So the people part is inside, but everything else I described is outside of the building. And that's a challenging thing for me. I'm still trying to find the right balance to that, of being present and visible and an anchor in the organization, a representative and embodiment of our culture that everybody can see every day, with doing the hard work of changing our reputation externally and brokering partnerships. I haven't gotten it right yet, and it ebbs and flows.
So if you look across the NFL, which team do you think, or a couple of teams, are doing the best job of sort of getting into the new world the fastest?
Yes. I have a lot of great confidants, and that's a great thing. While we are rivals on the field and nobody shares anything on the field with one another, it's like Fort Knox. We share a ton on the business side. We're all partners in business. And so the Miami Dolphins and their CEO, Tom Garfinkel, Al Guido, and the San Francisco 49ers, Burke Nihill and the Tennessee Titans, they're new like me, new in role and transforming. Those are just some of the folks that I talk to on a very regular basis that I think are thinking about the next generation of fandom. So Miami Dolphins in particular, they were one of the few NFL teams that were not profitable when Tom and his folks took over the team. And they are now the most profitable of the NFL teams in terms of EBITDA, not obviously gross revenue, but in EBITDA margins, they're the most profitable. And they did it, this is the first year they're really winning. They did it without winning. They did it while not being good on the field. And it's because they professionalized their business processes, they brought in right people, they turned over the organization, and they thought about the fan as more expansive. They have F1 races there. They own a tennis tour that comes through there. They have a Miami-style nightclub in their stadium. that people pay top dollar to come to when a game is playing, and they don't watch the game at all. They watch each other and dance, and there's a game going on in the background. They really thought through what is the unique Miami lens on the guest experience, and I've really learned from that. You know, our hallmarks of our guest experience are efficiency, because you got to get in and out, you got to get your food, you got to watch football, but authenticity. It needs to be a DC-based experience, whether that's the music, the food, the things that you do with your time, the way we've constructed the experience. And then the Niners are really what I envision us being with multiple business lines in the future, not just being anchored in your core product of football, but using this powerful global brand to bring you into other things. They have an investment arm and a VC arm. They have a consulting firm that started internal through their analytics division and now supports media and entertainment companies around the world on things like sponsorship sales, advertising, consumer research, called Elevate Ventures. It does a fantastic job. That actually, Elevate Ventures, analyzing the space, led them to purchase Leeds United. The Premier League, they're still Premier League, right? They're still up, yes, Premier League team. Actually having a decent year, better than my Liverpool. They purchased Leeds United. And so they've got a real umbrella portfolio of very high-performing companies that not only is fun to be a part of, which is what I want for our organization, but creates growth opportunities. You know, the guy, he's actually a Booth grad, Moon Javed. He was the first analytics staffer with the Niners years ago, straight out of Booth. He took the risk to go to sports straight out of Booth. And now he runs their global analytics for Elevate Ventures. He's one of the senior most professionals in sports now. So they've done some cool shit. And I'd like to do some cool shit too.
So do you all have ownership in any team other than in the NFL? No, not yet. Okay.
No. We've got our base model. We got some work to do before we're ready to do that. But we've got some stuff brewing already on the horizon, which I'm excited about, especially as well as merchandise has gone. There's some real cool opportunities to change the game and how we do merchandise in collaboration with local minority-owned companies that really have a pulse on culture. There's an opportunity to invest and scale and do something really unique.
So I'm going to ask you a tough question that came in. What is the leadership in football doing to combat CTE?
Oh, that's a good one. So the game is completely transformed when I played. And I'm a bit of a football curmudgeon. And I'm like, was that really a penalty? How can you can't even hit anybody anymore. That's how I get, right? But the net of that is the drastic reduction in the number of concussions that exist. When I was playing, what we used to call getting your bell rung or getting a dinger or whatever it was, that was a concussion. We didn't know. We were concussing ourselves multiple times. The NFL has allowed the research to lead them, and that's informed advances in the gameplay, the rules and safety in the gameplay, which I think is substantially different. I mean, you guys see it, in how they're preventing guys from really harming one another, and also in technology. This is the first year that all the teams have had the caps in practice, which is basically like an overlay on the helmets, and it's reduced concussions by 75% across the offensive linemen that have worn them so far this year. And so I feel a lot better about it. And here's where I come out on it, because again, Booth did this to me. I'm a bit of a dispassionate economist. The NFL was fantastic for me because it allowed me to have a nest egg of wealth that I was able to build on. And honestly, it allowed me to be a bit more bold at McKinsey. When I needed to make a bold decision to do what I thought was right for the client, and instead of just pleasing the partner or the manager, it's like, well, if I get fired, I got money, I'm fine, right? Like I'm okay. I took an 80% pay cut to be here, so I'm fine. There are advantages to the wealth that you can build. I hesitate to call it wealth. The money you can build, because it needs to last you a lifetime. The money you build as a player. And the economist lens comes in this way, that with transparency into the risks, each individual, and these are smart men, each individual can make the risk-return trade-off. My safety, my long-term health, all of these things, is it worth the compensation I'm getting? And now what the NFL is providing that you could argue it didn't always do, in the past, and they've admitted that, and had to pay out on it in the past, that they weren't providing full information. But now that full information is there, like, we're all grown. We're all grown. You make decisions, and I think it's an amazing. I would do it again. I would do it again, and I would feel even more comfortable now because of the transparency into the health implications. And to do that and be able to build a life for my family and potentially change the entire trajectory of a generation in my family from a financial standpoint, oh, hell yes. I'm in.
So I think we're sort of running out of time, right? So I'm going to ask you one last question and then have a lead-in question to our raffle. So the last question is, given that you came in as a player, does that how do people look at you? I mean, do they look at you differently? Do the players sort of appreciate what you do more? How does that play?
Yeah, it does. It builds credibility and trust, even though I was a sorry player compared to most of them. It does provide a measure of trust and connection. It's allowed me to have a really good partnership with Coach Rivera. Because at different points, the president role and the coach role and the GM role, they come into conflict with one another, whether it's about how we're investing and decisions we're making as a team and all of these things. And the fact that Ron and I were both former players, Ron's a smart guy, went to Cal, we could talk on that level and have that implicit trust. And then when you go and talk to players about the things you're doing to protect them, to support them, the environment and the culture you're trying to build, you don't come off as pedantic or inauthentic because they know you lived it. And when you can tell a story that is directly correlated or directly relatable to them, it makes a difference. And I do believe that over time, if we can leverage that to become the premier place where athletes feel like is an athlete-empowered football franchise in the NFL, we'll start to get more than our fair share of free agents, and it's going to get us Lombardi trophies in the future. And so I do lean into it. Okay. I think in the professional settings, I don't know, it's a neutral effect, it's a novelty. Maybe it's a negative where they're like, well, he played football, but does he really know the rest of this? And that's where, I open my mouth and Booth comes out, and all of a sudden it's all settled.
So, last question related to what we're going to do next. Will you and the team come to TNDC tomorrow night after your game?
I mean, I might have time. I like to kick it. The team will not. I can confirm that the team will not be at TNDC. If I somehow get stuck, let me know where it's at.
Yeah, exactly. Text them and text the location.
Okay. Got it. TNDC chair there, okay.
All right, so how are we doing the raffle? Okay, there you go. I
get to pick?
You get to pick.
All right, don't be mad at me.
Two people. No, okay, here you go.
All right.
Pick 2 people for the game tomorrow night.
Okay. So the first person who will get to see a Commanders victory is 312417. 312417. Nobody? Okay, we're going to keep going. Okay.
Go.
312504.
All right.
Got one? There we go. Okay, and 312376. Got it?
All right.
There we go. All right, 504 and 376. You got it.
So, Jason, thank you so much for coming
Thanks
and for being so
me.
incredibly candid in answering all the questions that came up. Again, we're thrilled that you're a Booth alum. We're thrilled that you've been so successful and that you keep coming back and helping us out. So we're just really thankful and proud of everything you've accomplished, and all the best.
Thank you for all you
guys
did.
Please
Thank
give
you.
Jason a big hand.
Thanks.